Okay, hello everyone and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Diana Ospina and I'll be your host for today. Today's topic is building a business case for HANA, presented by Arun Trivedi. Arun is a director in Cognizant's SAP practice and leads the sales and revenue transformational practice in North America. He is a frequent speaker on related topics on HANA and has spoken at ASUG and Sapphire platforms. Now without any further ado, I will pass this over to Arun to begin the webinar. One. Okay, Arun?
All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And first of all, my sincere apologies to everybody who has joined this call. It was a bad day. I got into an accident and all of that stuff. So once again, my sincere apologies for being late. I am generally not late, but again, apologies. So what we'll do is in the next session is we'll talk about building a business case for HANA. As you guys got to know, I work with Cognizant. I'm a director in our SAP practice, and I'm one of the practice leaders focusing a lot on the tech sector clients and based in the West Coast. So what we'll do is in the session that we have today is, we see that a lot of companies have frequent questions about HANA. What does it do for, most of us on the call have seen that the direction from SAP has been to go on to HANA. And there's a lot of push that's coming from the market. Many of you may have done research on HANA to see what it is, what can it do for your company. So this session is to address a lot of the questions that you might have. And how do you use HANA for your business, right? So that's what we'll try to address as part of this session. We'll also be talking about, what HANA is, what S4 HANA in particular is, what are some of the high-level capabilities that they have, and how should your company really go about implementing a business case for HANA, and how should it go about implementing HANA in the long term. So I do want to say that HANA is actually a platform, and there are a number of applications that can be built on top of HANA. And S4 HANA is called it the new ERP suite from SAP, which is the fourth generation. We have seen the evolution of SAP from R1 to R2 to R3 to MySAP, and now finally the S4 HANA, which is really the fourth generation of HANA. So we'll talk about all of that in the next 30 to 45 minutes. Now, before we talk deeper about what it is, let's just hear from some of the companies, what companies have been doing, other companies that have been doing, so we can see what their strategic objectives have been and how they have leveraged HANA in some form or shape to deliver business value for their business. So the first one and what I've done is I've selected 3 different companies across all the projects that Cognizant has worked on, we have worked on. Different varieties of flavors of HANA to help you understand, where the core drivers are and what is it that companies are trying to do with this solution. So the first company that we have, it's based in the US and in the Australia, and it's a pharma company. And what they wanted to do was, they had multiple business applications, their processes were all over the place, and they really wanted to achieve operational excellence across the process, core processes, and across order to cash, in finance, in procurement, reporting, and so on and so forth. And they wanted to have a business model that is really scalable, efficient, and risk mitigated. And the key thing over there was this company was growing by both organic and inorganic acquisition, and they needed something that would help them, attain the growth, to help them with the growth. So what we did was, from a solution standpoint, this is something that we would anyways do as part of the business process reengineering, the chart of account harmonization as well, across the pharma manufacturing companies and the biotechnology. So we did all of that. Besides, we also did a global template design, and we tested it, we built it, we tested it, had all the whole 9 yards of a typical implementation. And they had also had SAP and non-SAP systems. some of the non-SAP systems had to be moved over to SAP on the HANA platform. So we did that. And some of the other non-SAP systems that we could really push over the business processes onto SAP. So that is something that we're able to successfully do with them. Over and above, we also wanted to do, and they also wanted to do analytics and reporting using the HANA platform. So that's the other thing that was developed as part of this solution. Now, really, how did it benefit them? So 3 key things that really happened in this particular example. One, they had faster and standardized business process. So earlier, they had issues around month-end closing, for example, which is really taking them a long time. But with this process, they were able to close the books faster. They had much more standardized process, and there was lesser work to be done in reconciliation, financial reconciliation, and others. And the business could really, apart from after having achieved those objectives, the business could really do more analytical stuff and take accelerated decision making. And of course, the end result of all of this was lower capex spend as well, because there are so many applications and they're spending so much money on licensing and maintenance, that with the new rationalized model that we had built for them on the HANA platform, really the capex spending actually went down. So the core drivers that they wanted to achieve was something that we could help achieve. So that was one geography. Let's go shift focus to another example. This is a retail client. So the first one was a life sciences pharma client, and this one is a retail client in Asia and India, in Mumbai. And they had similar types of issues, similar business objectives. Wanted to grow faster, and of course, digital transformation is catching up a lot of industry segments, and so with them. And they wanted a common platform across the enterprise that could really enable them to have harmonized business process and drive efficiency across all of these business processes. And they had some serious issues around the order to cash process, the procurement process, and the reporting process. So including the ability for the people to kind of look at these and make meaning out of all the things that they were trying to do. And then they also had multiple SAP and non-SAP systems, and which is really eating into the the overall total cost of maintenance of all of these IT applications. So they really wanted to decommission all of these applications. Some of these applications were performing 1 or 2 business functions, which may or may not be so important for them, and they wanted to really move them to the core SAP system. And these had been built over a long period of time. So what we did was, they had 14 different legal entities that currently operate. Each of them have their own financial systems, their own logistics systems. So we did a detailed blueprint cutting across all of these 14 legal entities, and we harmonized the finance and the logistics processes across all of these companies. And then we established some key KPIs for each of the business process that would be measured in the S/4HANA platform and would enable the scorecards, and these could then be presented to the senior leadership in the form of a dashboard. And all of these were achieved using the S/4HANA platform. Now, meaning just to say, as part of all of these large-scale transformation, one of the key things that organizations do want to take this opportunity is to also leverage as much of standard SAP functionality, because SAP functionality, really many of these are built upon best practices. So they wanted to leverage as much as standard as possible, and that's something that we're able to work with the key stakeholders involved to ensure that they're following more standard SAP functionality rather than trying to build custom. The company, being in retail, typically, the margins are, it's a very margin-driven company, right? So product costing was obviously very important for them, and profitability analysis was very, very important for them. So we built robust solutions around product costing and profitability using the HANA platform to ensure that they were driving full benefits. Now, as part of this, as I said earlier, this company in particular had multiple ERP systems, so the master data was all over the place. So one of the key things that we helped them achieve was master data harmonization. So really cleaned up all the master data, made sure that the single version of the truth of master data is across the enterprise, across all the 14 legal entities that they had. So that was all done as part of the cleanup and the migration to the S/4HANA system. In terms of core benefits, because now they had better master data harmonization, so that increased the efficiencies in the overall process. So earlier, they would have a SKU. That SKU could mean, or the material could mean different things in different systems, or maybe the numbers would be different. But now with the harmonization process of the master data, the overall efficiency actually went up. The total cost of ownership is actually, it lowered the TCO because, now they have multiple applications with this revised version, one S4 HANA system that pretty much took care of a lot of their business process and the finance process. And of course, dashboard reporting and cockpits were very important for them. So we designed analytics within the HANA platform so that they could use these dashboards to do more analytical work and also to present key KPIs to the top leadership. So two stories, pretty much one from the life sciences, one from the retail company. So another example that they have, and this is the third one, which is a slightly different flavor. The first two are more on the S4 HANA, and this one is more on the reporting and purely on the reporting and analytics piece, which is for BW on SAP HANA. So this was an energy company based here in the US, and their core business objectives were, they wanted to provide quick reporting to the internal and external stakeholders. And reporting analytics, based on stakeholder needs, it needs to be nimble and quick response time. That's very important for the leadership to be able to quickly change things around the reporting needs as the case may be and take quick decisions. So that was the other objective that they had. And then, of course, the monthly close cycle time was generally very high because a lot of reconciliation reports was being generated, and there's a lot of other reports that were being generated from the current BW system, and that was causing significant pain to the business users. So what we did for them was, their core ECC was ERP system was still on the older one, but for core BW, we implemented the BW on the HANA platform. And then, that simplified the data modeling, and it let them significantly improve the performance of the reports that they had, and the agility of the business to turn things around, or the IT to turn things around as and when there was a business need. So, long story short, 3 different companies, multiple different industry segments, different challenges, but the solution was essentially one single platform, which is around HANA. Either from an core ERP standpoint, from a business process standpoint, or an analytics and reporting standpoint, which help each one of these companies improve their business process and possibly more attuned to their overall strategic imperatives. So those are some of the things that I thought would share with everybody on the call, so people can get an idea of what other companies are trying to do, where they are in their adoption journey. And what are some of the benefits that clients are trying to derive from the HANA platform? So now we'll go back to our core agenda for the session today. So having said that, the core benefits and hearing from some of our customers, let's talk about what really HANA is and what is S4 HANA, and how do we go about building a business case, because I think that's very important. People on the organizations have to be really convinced that this is the right solution for them. In order to really start making those investments onto HANA platform. And then we'll talk about, once you have decided that you have the business case and you feel that this is the right solution for you, then really how should you go about implementing the solution? So that would be the third part of our presentation. So talking about the first part. Now, digital transformation, as I said earlier, is a reality in the world that we live in today. If you think about the way business is conducted today, right? It's kind of, I don't have the details with me. You hear people talk about, oh my God, it takes us days to close our books. And there are multiple, business potential that we're kind of losing out. We are trying to acquire companies, we're trying to grow inorganic, but when we acquire companies, we also acquire the ERP systems. We have our master data all over the place. Our reporting takes too long to run, and so on and so forth. So these are all the things that you have, that you see on the Business 1.0 version today on the left, is the typical kinds of challenges that many of you run into at all different points of time. Now on the right, what you have is really the business of the future. And I saw something interesting actually that I thought I would share with everybody on LinkedIn. I was browsing through LinkedIn a couple of days back, and they had a picture of, somebody had shared a picture of a candle, and next to the candle was an electric bulb. And it says at the bottom that the electric bulb was not invented by a continuous improvement of the candle. The electric bulb was an innovation, and once it was innovated, people started adopting to it. So same thing, the current processes that you may have, you could continuously start monitoring it and trying to improve it, But then really the key message here is, in order to enable yourself and enable your company for the digital disruption that's coming in, you really need to have some disruption around your application to support it. And your current process that you may have is not really meant to address those kinds of businesses. They were meant for business of yesterday. They were, cutting edge, some years ago. But given the reality that we live in today, you need to have rethink, reimagine the way your applications are built, so that the business can reimagine the business that they are doing. So in future, if you look on the right side of this picture, the B 2.0 is, when in the boardroom, sitting in the boardroom, executives want to be able to look at data in real time. What does my margin look at for North America? What is my sales numbers are for this? What is really driving those sales? Right, so it should not be, oh, I'll come back to with you later, but they should be in a position to look at real numbers in real time and drive business decisions while they are sitting in those meetings and not having to wait for a couple of days, because remember, it's a fast-changing world and we really want to take decisions very quickly. So that should be the vision of the boardroom in the future. Other operational things, for example, in the closing our books, it should be like any other day. We should not be taking days and days to close the books. Companies will grow organically and inorganically. There will be acquisitions, and we can see trends across industries. Companies are rapidly acquiring companies, and when you acquire companies, it should be a very seamless transition. We should very quickly be able to incorporate the business of the acquired company into the new company, into the acquirer company, and then very quickly have the benefits of the synergies built in. And then, in the future, it's all about the volume, variety, and the velocity. So anybody who adapts very quickly, time to market, people keep talking about time to market, how do you reduce the time to market, right? All of these are very critical aspects of the business for tomorrow, and we've got to make sure that we're addressing from the IT side and from the application side, we're addressing all of those questions and, the direction that the business has. So that is something that is the promise of HANA. Everything that you see is on the right, which is the business of tomorrow. Very soon it's going to be become the business of today. So that is the promise of the HANA platform. So what is really S/4HANA? So as I said, HANA is overall it's a complete platform, and HANA also allows you to build your own applications. Now in particular, what is S/4HANA? So it's the next generation business suite. And it's a it's a brand new product. Don't think of it as an upgrade from the prior versions of SAP. It's not an upgrade. It's a brand new product from SAP. It's the next generation business suite, completely redesigned, rebuilt, reimagined, and has significant simplifications and innovation that are built in, which is meant for the business 2.0 that we saw in the previous slide. The user experience is totally different. It's based on SAP Fiori, so it's really a consumer-grade experience. Most of us, millennials in particular, are used to, Facebook, Twitter, and consumer-grade apps, and these are gradually becoming over to the business. So earlier it was like, you would have one set of apps at home, like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and then in office it would be, the visual stuff, the traditional GUI-based applications, which would be slow and to respond and and not nimble at all. But then, the experience that we have from the consumers are coming to the company as well, to the enterprise as well, and we would have the similar type of experience, and that's what SAP Fiori does. It significantly changes the business or the user experience. The other part is the simplification, and that's and innovation, and those are very, very critical terms for us to understand. As we move from one version of ERP world that we're there to the business suite of tomorrow. There are significant simplifications, and I'll talk about a bit of them in a little bit. In finance, in supply chain, in logistics, the significant simplifications that have been built in, and the objectives of those simplifications is a faster business process. So what earlier used to take minutes and hours is now a question of seconds and minutes. That's the advantages we're looking at. And then things like Internet of Things or big data or business networks or the mobile first, right? All of these are becoming reality even in the new world. There are significant business operations that you should be able to do using your mobile phone rather than just using your mobile phone to check Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. So that's about S/4HANA, and so as you can see, very significantly different from what we have today, the traditional ECC. and in terms of user experience, business functionality, and processes. The next part we'll talk about, what's really a framework for building a business case. Now, for any business, in order to build a core business case, there are at least 4 different aspects that we should be looking at. And that in the Cognizant world, we call it as the CROP, which stands for the cost, revenue, operational efficiency, and the people experience. And they are not arranged in any particular order. So let's look at the revenue first. So as we said earlier, there are new revenue streams that are coming in. Just a few days back, I was in a client meeting for a tech sector client, and they are moving from a perpetual licensing world to a subscription world. And subscriptions, obviously, because it opens up a totally new avenues for them. It's much more sustainable. That's where they see the market grow, and they have seen significant growth in the subscription-oriented world. And so far they have perpetual world, and this opens up a completely new avenue for them, and they are seeing rapid increase in revenue for these new types of revenue models. Some days back I was talking to another manufacturing customer for services oriented for the services. Right, they are moving more towards the recurring revenue type business models. Now, all of these means that the revenue is not really coming in from whatever the companies had, but they are trying to find out new avenues of monetization of the existing products. Take printers, for example. Most companies are not buying printers anymore, right? If think about a company like Lexmark, for example, you would buy the printers and then you are done. It's a done deal. But now printers are being offered as a service. All right, so the products are being monetized in different ways, and those are the new avenues of business that is opening up. So what's happening is you need to have mechanisms of your systems which is really internet enabled or IoT enabled. You have connected devices, and you have a whole new monetization model that's available for you. The other part is how do you improve the customer life cycle with improved services and response. So far you might have seen your business or the team talking about, we can only offer certain price points to certain sec, which means that you're really limiting the products and the market to a certain set of people, because pricing, you cannot do pricing in a certain way, you cannot offer products and features in a certain way. But then with the new revenue with the models that we have, it opens up a new avenue, because with the flexibility that you could potentially have, you could open up your product and monetize it in a way that's available to people anywhere. It could be an individual consumer, it could be like a mom and pop shop as a consumer versus very large enterprises. So you could go either way, up or down the value chain, depending on where your company sees the market is. And that leads to significant transaction volume from a revenue side, and you don't want to lose that revenue. So that's where this comes in, and those are the kind of avenues that you have to look at when you're trying to come up with a business case to help you build a business case. The second part is the cost part. So we see a lot of our clients, having multiple applications, that have either been acquired or they have been built over a period of time. Some of them are licensed. You're paying license and maintenance. There is a capex involved, and so on and so forth. If you look at the total cost of ownership, right, the total amount of investment they're making in the right infrastructure, it is significantly high. So the other thing that you could do is, relook at the entire portfolio that you have and think about how S/4 HANA can come in, and really, you could migrate a lot of these functions and decommission a lot of your existing systems and applications that you may have, and use the new platform. And that really gives you reduces significantly the total investment that you are making on your IT infrastructure today. The other thing that's possible today is the on-prem versus the cloud option. So you can choose between the capex and the opex. Because if it's the S/4 HANA platform is also available on the cloud, so that's a benefit that you could take instead of investing significant amounts of dollars on trying to implement an on-prem version. But again, those are different types of discussion that need to happen before we take a call one way or the other. But the key message here is that there's significant impact to the cost that could be enabled by having an application that takes care of a lot more business functions than what you have today, and thereby being able to decommission and save money on that. The third thing is around the people experience, and when I say people, it means internal to the organization as well as external to the organization. Right. So one is you're bringing consumer grade experience, user experience to the people. So that way, people don't have to wear a different hat when they come to work versus when they check Facebook and LinkedIn at home. And then it reduces time because the overall systems are so intuitive. It's the portals and the UIs are so intuitive that it significantly reduces the time and the overall organizational change management. I mean, I remember I'm an SD consultant. When I started off, there was a significant amount of time that we used to spend trying to tell people, this is where you go to enter the pricing, this is where you go to enter the items, and so on and so forth. But with the revised Fiori-based apps, it's so convenient and it's so intuitive that people don't have to be trained; they just get it. So that way, it significantly cuts the change management and the training times. And the fourth thing that I'll talk about is the operational efficiency, because the system is so intuitive and because they are much faster, the overall efficiency of your process, of your business process, it goes up. So things like your time to close, your time to market, and your agility, the analytics give you improved insights. All of these essentially means that you're doing more in less time, which means that you're much more efficient as a company than what you used to be. So to summarize, the four things that we spoke about, which is called the TROP framework, essentially is the cost, the revenue, the operational efficiency, and the people experience. And really, real-time business means that your core business functions are a new paradigm and enable one or more of these TROP levers that we just spoke about. So you would see that you would have new avenues of revenue. There are new ways by which you can cut down costs. Because you're doing more in less time, your operational efficiencies are, much improved, and the people experience, the organization, the change in the training and the change management, all of those go down because people have a very unique experience now. It's very intuitive rather than people trying to figure out what do I do next. So these are some of the aspects that you should keep in mind as you're coming up with a business case for the S/4HANA platform. So hoping that that gives you a framework for building a business case for HANA along all the four levers that we spoke about, the C, the cost, the R, the revenue, the O, the operational efficiency, and the P, meaning the people experience. So once you are done along that path, right, you are convinced that this is the right thing for you to do. It makes sense for you to have a business case for HANA, and it makes sense for your business. The next step is obviously to think about, how do we get there, and what kind of an implementation plan that we should have. So my recommendation to a lot of clients is, don't jump onto it. So start with an assessment. Always start with an assessment. You'll be surprised that there's so many options, and there could be a custom path built for company to company, because there are so many things that are very unique about a company business process. So all of that have to be factored into account when we start doing the roadmap planning and the scenario planning and the implementation planning. So I say, always begin with an assessment. An assessment typically could be anywhere between 3 to 6 to 5 weeks, but it makes so much sense once you've started looking at that. And typical question that you should really address is when you start with an assessment is, all of these 6 things that you see here on the cloud, which is what process of application should I start with? Obviously, nobody wants to do Big Bang because it is significantly disruptive. If you do Big Bang, that's an option too. But then, depending on the culture of the company, that may not be an option. So really, I have to think about what process application should I start looking at. The main thing is, do I really need it? So that's one of the first things that has to be addressed. Then the other thing that you have to look at, what happens to the customization. A lot of the SAP clients, and many of you are from the SAP background, you would have tons of customization that have been built over a period of time. So what happens to those customizations? How do you remediate the code that you may have built over a period of time? And how can you reuse them, repurpose them, and leverage them that you have? Then, what are the options? You could be running multiple ERPs, SAP, non-SAP ERPs, some custom apps. So what are really the options that you have, when you start? And then the next question is, as you're getting closer, what it means is how much time will it take to implement the solution, and how much will it cost? And what does it really mean for my people? People are used to doing things in a certain way. The application changes. What does it mean for the people? So these are the core things that you should always think about, when you start down the path. And an assessment really helps you address all of these and maybe much more questions that you might have specific to your business. So key message, always start with an assessment. So you could have multiple options over here. So on the left, on this picture, you see that you have at a high level, you have three different paths that you could take. The first one is a brand new implementation. You could have an existing ERP SAP system, it could be non-SAP system, irrespective of your ERP landscape. You could begin the project as a brand new implementation. And one benefit of this approach is that it gives you it lets you take advantage of taking a fresh look at your business, right? So let's start almost from scratch, and let's say how can we do a net new implementation without having the baggage of yesterday, and take a fresh look at everything that's going on. Of course, there are a lot of things that you could take advantage of from your existing systems, but then with a new model that you have, with a new implementation, it gives you a fresh perspective. So that's one part. And if you're a non-SAP customer, this could be a new implementation. It could be one way of going. If you are an SAP customer, then still is an option, to think about. And the other thing is, you could look at either approaches. You could either go on-prem or you could go on the cloud. There are multiple ways of deploying it. So the deployment option is also something that you could think about. So that's the first way. The second one is the system conversion. So you, for example, you are an existing customer, you have an SAP Business Suite and running on AnyDB, and then you want to go to the S/4HANA platform, right? So there's a system conversion that happens, and we could look at how we could enable by leveraging existing systems, existing processes that you may have, and yet implement new processes, new functions on the S/4HANA platform. So it still gives you the benefits, but again, you are trying to leverage some of the stuff that you already have in your current system. And then the third one is what we call the landscape transformation, where we see a lot of big size companies where they have multiple ERP systems, and they want to transform their entire landscape into a single version of ERP. So using some kind of data transformation mechanisms, and we can talk into a more deep dive session at a later point of time on how exactly do we enable that, how exactly do we enable the data application part. But the landscape transformation really enables that from a multiple ERP systems to a single, either on-prem or cloud-based version of the S/4HANA. That really gives you, from a TCO standpoint, overall the TCO would go down, and you would have benefits in terms of the immediate benefits you would have in terms of the cost of maintenance of all of these legacy applications that you have versus just having one application to maintain and manage. So these are all the options that you could have, and depending on where you are, we could pick one of these and have a deep dive session to help you understand where is it that you could go next. Now, in order to do this really quickly and with least disruption, right? So one of the options that we frequently go ahead with is something known as a central finance option, which is part of the S/4HANA finance. What it really means is, you could have multiple ERP systems and you want the least disruption. So what we could do is we could stand up a version of S/4HANA which has what is known as a central finance enabled in it, and using the SAP landscape transformation, we could replicate all the data that you have in your existing systems into the central finance. And central finance has intricate amount of details. For example, you could also go to the document details. For example, when we replicate the data in the central finance, it also has line item details, for example, in the system. And so that's step number one. And then you could use the SAP S/4HANA, the central finance instance of SAP, to start adding more functionality over a period of time. So that way it is less disruptive. You have stood up a S/4HANA landscape with the data replicated from your all the ERP systems, and slowly and gradually over a period of time, depending on the organizational culture and the roadmap that you have, you could gradually start deploying more and more functions and migrating business process from existing ERPs and decommissioning existing systems onto the new platform. And this is something that that is least disruptive and yet helps you get there. And I know there may be more questions around it, and we can certainly talk about this in a follow-up session. So that was my last slide. I know we are towards the end of this meeting, and once again, my apologies for being late. But if you have any additional questions, my contact numbers are here, my cell number is here, my LinkedIn profile is here. Feel free to call me or email me, whichever mechanism works best for you, and we can have a more detailed conversation around what exactly would work for your organization and your business situation. With that, I would hand it back to Michael Management.
Thank you, Arun. I appreciate your time and no worries. Thank you, everyone. Now is the time if anyone has questions. We did receive a question while you were doing the presentation. This one comes from Stan. It was towards the beginning, but he asked if the examples are cloud-based, the examples you provided.
No, all the examples that I had there was on-prem based. But there are also a lot of clients who are doing HANA on the cloud.
Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? I have a question here. How is S4 HANA different from traditional SAP ECC?
Right. So S4 HANA is fundamentally different from traditional ECC. One is it's a brand new product from SAP, so it's not that it's an upgrade. That's one. The second part is a lot of the business process in S4 HANA are simplified compared to the traditional HANA, right? The other thing to understand is the traditional ECC environment, you could use any database to run on it. But the new version of the S4 HANA is built just for the HANA environment, for the HANA database. So you cannot run S4 on any other database. So it's meant for HANA, which means that from database standpoint, it's meant to run on the in-memory platform, which is what HANA is. The business processes are different, the table structures are different, the way the processes work, they're totally different compared to ECC. So fundamentally new product, new business process, and only runs on the HANA database, not on any other database.
Okay, great. Now we have a question here from Deshant. What are the implications to organizations of Business Suite reaching the end of its life in 2025? Right.
So what that means is by that point of time, you have ample time between now and 2025 to fully implement S4 HANA. And like I said, we could discuss about a roadmap that works best for the individual companies, but ultimately you have to go the S4 HANA route. That's the future of SAP.
Great, thank you, Arun. And now I have a hand raised here from Alvin. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so you may ask your question. Alvin?
Hi, my question is, do you have to have basic SAP training to go onto the SAP HANA?
You need to have the process understanding. If you wanted to be on the developer side or on the configuration side, yes, you need to have the training, the SAP training. But if you're a business user, then as I said, it's a very intuitive mechanism, so you do not need any training as such.
Okay, thank you, Arun. Now we have another hand raised here from Stan. Stan, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Arun, can you back up one slide?
Yep.
The system landscape transformation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that entails?
Yeah, certainly. So the system landscape transformation is a mechanism. It's again a product from SAP, which lets you replicate data from existing ERP systems to the S4 HANA environment. And you could choose what tables are there, what fields that you want to be replicated onto the S4 HANA Central Finance instance. So it's a configuration-enabled engine that helps you transform data from existing legacy environments to the new S4 HANA based environment.
Great, and we have one more question here from Deshant again. He asked, what key business dimensions can you add to your business case?
So if I understand the question right, the business case that we spoke about, the framework that we provided was around the 4 parameters, which is the cost, aspects of it, the revenue, the operational efficiency, and the people experience. But if there are other attributes that work best for your business, we could certainly add, when we do an exercise of trying to develop a business case for your specific company, then there are specific parameters that we could add. For example, it could be around reporting or specific KPIs. We could look at that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So anybody else have any questions? All right, Arun, I think that is it. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, we apologize for the delay. Thank you for sticking with us and bearing with us through this. I will send out a copy of the webinar slides once we are done. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact myself or Arun directly. His information is up on the screen, and it will be included in the webinar slides. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thanks, everybody.